This will be our test 3 review in intermediate algebra for factoring. We want to factor completely. Notice there is no equal sign on any of these problems until we get to new directions. So we are not saying g equals 5 or g equals 8 or x equals this or y equals that. We're not doing any of that stuff right here. We're just factoring. So here we have one term, two terms. When we have two terms, we say, is there a GCF, a greatest common factor? And indeed, 3 goes into 75. So the first thing I want to do is take a 3 out front. I'm left with g squared minus, and if I take a 3 out of 75, I'm left with 25, right? 3/4 is 75 cents. Then I look at this and I say, okay, I have a squared inside my parentheses. So that means, can I do anything more to that? Well, even power, a minus, and a perfect square. Guess what? That is difference of squares all day long. So 3, then we have g and g. What do we square to get 25? 5 times 5. So we put 5 here, and then 1 positive and 1 minus. And now all my pluses and minuses are in parentheses, and I don't have any powers bigger than 1, and I don't have any other GCFs in my parentheses, so I am done. 3 times g plus 5 times g minus 5. The next one, 3 terms. Do I have a GCF? We'll look at 30, 10, and 15. Well, that must be a 5. And then x's. There's x's in every term. We got x cubed, x squared, and x squared. So what's the smallest power there? X squared. So bring that out. And then y squared, y to the 4th, and y squared again. Y is in every term, so the smallest power is y to the 2nd. So 5x to the 2nd, y to the 2nd. What's left over? When I take a 5 out of 30, I get what? 6. So 6, and then I have 3 x's here, and I took 2 out. So that's going to give me 1x remaining. I have 2 y's, and I took both of them out. No x's in the first term. Then I have minus, because I didn't bring a sign. I didn't bring anything out here to change it, so I have that minus. What about 5 and 10? That's going to be 2, right? 10 divided by 5 is 2. 2 x's, I have 2 x's and brought 2 out. There's no x's remaining. Here I had 4 x's, and I brought how many out? 2. So then that leaves me with 2 y's, right? Maybe I just said x's. So I had 4 y's here, 2 y's here. There's 2 left over. And then plus 15 divided by 5 is what? 3. And then I have my x squareds and my y squareds. So I don't have any x's or y's left in that term. So 6x minus 2y squared plus 3 is in my parentheses. Because of this, I look at it and say, will it go any further? But it won't. So that's it. I had a GCF, and I'm done factoring this one. So we're going to put over here in our answer box. We're going to use a pencil on the test so we can erase things. We're going to put all of our answers. See, like if I write x squared, I can erase it. Minus 2y squared plus 3. And then we're going to put all our answers in the answer box. Next problem has 2 terms. Is there a GCF? There is nothing in common with 125 and also with 27. It's a difference of squares. No. It's a minus, but that's not an even power. Those aren't perfect squares. Is it SOPs? This indeed is set up SOPs. So the setup looks like this. Well, what do you cube to get 125? 5. And what do you cube to get x cubed? X. And then you bring down your sign here and put a minus. And then what do you cube to get 27? 3. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So then we're going to square the first term. We're going to take this 5x and square it. That gives me 25x squared. The opposite sign, here's a minus, so the opposite sign is a plus. Then you have a product. That is 5x times 3. Remember, we don't care about that negative 3. We've already taken care of my sign right here with the opposite. So 5x times 3 is 15x. And then this is always a plus. And then we're going to square the last thing, the 3 here, and that gives me 9. So there's my final answer. We have 5x minus 3, and then we have 25x squared plus 15x plus 9. And then we have the airplane down here. We have x squared plus 5x plus 36. It's how many terms? 3. That means this has nothing to do with grouping. This has nothing to do with difference of squares or SOPs. The first thing I always tick for is a GCF. There is no GCF here. Then I look through and I say, okay, is there a 1 in the front? Yes, there's a 1 in the front. So that means this is not bottoms up. This is, I'm looking for the factors of what? 36, 2 and 18, 3 and 12. I'm writing kind of big, 4 and 9, 6 and 6. All those things multiply to give me 36. So which ones, what do I want them to do? I want the ones that add to give me 5. I really underline just the 5. Don't need to worry about the sign right now. What adds to give me 5? Well, that's 37. This is 1 plus 36 is 37. This is 20. This is 15. This is 13. And this is 12. So nothing adds to give me 5. 4 and 9 subtract to give me 5, but they don't add. So this thing here is non-factorable. Okay? You may get some of these, but again, if you get more than about 3 of these, I would really begin to worry if I got to 4. And if I got to 5, I'd know I was wrong. Okay? Because there's only going to be 15 or 16, as I told y'all before. 15 or 16 factor, and then 5 or 6 solve. So here, the star, the inverted star, we got 100 minus w squared. That's 2 terms. Is there a GCF? No GCF, right? No GCF. So then what do? Well, is it difference of squares? Well, that's a perfect square. That's a minus, and that's a even power, right? So guess what? It checks off everything it needs to. So then we're going to come down here and say, what do we square to get 100? 10, because look, if 100 comes first, the 10s have to come in the first half of the parenthesis. You can't put the 10s second. That's something different. And then in the back, w squared gives you w, and then one of those is plus, one of those is minus. And the order of the plus minus doesn't matter, but the 10s got to come before the w. So 10 plus w, 10 minus w. Just to make sure I put all my answers in there. Go back and check real quick. Yep, they're all in the answer boxes. That's good. So here, how many terms? 3 terms, right? X squared is 1 term, negative 3x, negative 70. 3 terms. Is there a GCF? Nope. And then there's a 1 in the front, which means this is not bottoms up. This is just the regular old factors of 70. 1 and 70, 2 and 35, 3, 4, 5 and 14, 7 and 10, and that's all of them. I want the factors of 70 that do what? Subtract to give me 3. What is 10 minus 7? That's 3. So I'm going to come over here and put x and 7 and x and 10. And then what? Different signs. I don't care what this is. Forget that's there. That says different, right? So different signs we read as the bigger number gets this first sign. So the bigger number gets a what? A negative. Which one's bigger? 10 is bigger than 7, right? So that means 10 gets the negative and 7 gets a different sign, which is positive. There's my final answer, x plus 7, x minus 10. How many terms are in the next problem? That's right, 4. You have 1, 2, 3, and 4 terms. Is there a GCF with all 4 terms? Here the answer is no. So the only thing we did with 4 terms was grouping. Remember? 4 terms kind of yells out grouping at you. Grouping. So how do I group? Well, I'm going to try the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. That may or may not work. You may have to rearrange the terms. But here we're going to try this. So the first 2 terms, what do they have in common? And when I say in common, you're literally doing this GCF business that we've been doing on these 2 terms. Forget the oranges there. So then 4 and 8 have a 4 in common, and Q and M don't have anything else in common. So this is going to be Q minus 2M, right? Because 4 times Q is 4Q, 4 times 2 is 8, and it's negative, and then the M is there, right? So Q minus 2M there. Now the orange, let's go over here and factor this. 5CQ and negative 10CM. So they have a 5 and a C in common, and we typically take this sign out. So let's put a plus here. Again, that may not work. You may need to make that a minus and see if it works. Or change the sign. And then what's left over? We have a Q, because we have the 5C already out front, the Q. And then here, take a 5 out of 10, we get a what? A minus 2, a negative 10 I should say. The C is already here, right? That C is already there. And then we have left over with an M. So my question now is that I've done a GCF for the first 2 terms and a GCF for the second 2 terms is, do they have anything in common now? Did grouping work? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. And why did grouping work? Because this parenthesis and this parenthesis are the same. That's what you bring out front now. Now you come out front and say, Q minus 2M. And the reason, by the way, that I know I keep going, look at this plus sign. Is that in parentheses? No. Then that's a dead giveaway that I have not finished factoring completely, which is what the directions say, factor completely. So this is not factored all the way because of this plus sign that's outside of parentheses. So now I come back and say, okay, what's left over? Well, I took this out of this, right? So what's left over here? The 4, right? So then I'm going to have a 4, and then I'm going to go over to the orange side. What did I take out? I took this out right here, right? So what's left over? Plus 5C. So we're going to put plus 5C. And that is your final answer. Now, because look, that's in parentheses, that's in parentheses. There's no powers bigger than 1. There's nothing left that's a GCF. So you're good. Q minus 2M times 4 plus 5C. And then we have this one here at the top. It's how many terms? It's 3. Is there a GCF? Nope. No GCF. So is the number out front of 1? This time it is not, which means this is bottoms up. I take the 6 times the 15, and I make me a little thought cloud over here. Again, I want to encourage you to draw a thought cloud. The 6 is gone, so that becomes x squared minus x. Minus, what is 6 times 15? 6 times 10 is 60. 6 times 5 is 30. 60 and 30 gives you 90. So take something out, multiply it, make sure you get it, but 90 is what that should be. Now this is 3 terms, 1, 2, 3, and there's a 1 in the front, right? So this is just regular old factors of 90. 2 and 45, there may be too many lists inside here. 3 and 30, that should be. 4 won't go into it. 5 and 18, 6 and 15 is how we found it. 7, 8, 9, and 10. So do any of those subtract to give me 1 here? 10 and 9, right? So let's come over here with x and 10 and x and 9. And what about my signs? The bigger number gets the first sign. And this also says they are different, right? So the bigger, that's why we use the word bigger. Because the bigger number gets, so bigger number 10 is bigger than 9. So it gets the negative and 9 gets a positive. But I'm in my thought cloud. That helps remind me, hey, I'm not done yet. Okay? So I've got to go back and divide by the 6, right? Whatever this is, come over here and divide both of these things by that number, right? So does 10 and 6 have anything in common? A 2 goes into both of them. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. 6 divided by 2 is 3. Bring that 3 up. So now this, to come out here, is going to be 3x minus 5, right? The 3 comes in front of the x. What about 9 and 6? Well, they both have a 3 in common. So 3 divided into 9 is 3. 3 goes into 6 twice. Now a 2 comes up. So this is going to be 2x plus 3. And there's your final answer. If you FOIL that out, you will end up with, this will end up being this if you FOIL it, okay? So we get 3x minus 5, and then we get 2x plus 3. The next one, we have the scissors here, 3 terms. There's no GCF. There's a 1 in the front right here, which means it's not bottoms up. It's not what we just did. We just want the factors of 144 that add to give me 24. And some of y'all see those right away. We're going to say this is going to be M and M. It's going to be 12 and 12. 12 times 12 is 144. 12 plus 12 is 24. This time the signs are the same. This tells me they're the same. Don't worry about what's there. They're both this sign, okay? So both this thing right here. So they're both negative. Negative and negative. But if we look at this, m minus 12 and m minus 12, they are identical. If they're identical, we rewrite that as m minus 12 squared. M minus 12 squared. And likewise, if you had 3 of them that were identical, you'd put cubed. But this one just has 2, so it's just squared. All right, then we have 2 terms again, 13m minus 9n. Is there anything in common with both those terms? Is there a GCF? There's no GCF. Is it difference of squares? No, there's not even a power. Is it SOPs? Again, no power. Can't be. So guess what? If it's not a GCF, not SOPs, and not difference of squares, this thing right here won't factor. So now we've had, what, 2 of those? Again, you get more than 2 and 3, I'd feel pretty good about it. If you got 1 or 0, or if you got more than 4, I wouldn't be very happy with those. If I got none, or if I got 5 or more, I'd know I was wrong, okay? Because there's going to be some that won't work. It's always something that won't work. So then here, 2 terms again, 10xy, negative 30y. What do they have in common? GCF, that's what we're going to do first, a 10. Anything else? They both have a y in them, right? So what's left if I take a 10y out of this? Take a 10y out, and we're left with x. And then minus, if I take a 10 out of this, that's going to be what? 3, and then I've taken the y out, so I'm only left with what there? Just a 3. And there's nothing else you can do to that now. This is the only thing that's a plus or minus in this in parentheses. There's no power bigger than 1, and there's no GCF between those two terms right there to bring out because you've already done that. So that's going to be 10y times x minus 3. 10y times x minus 3. Here again we have 2 terms. Is it a GCF? Nope. Is it difference of squares? Well, 16 is a perfect square. This is an even power, but look at that. That's not a minus, so therefore it's not difference of squares for that plus. Remember, this is the sum of squares. It's not overly important other than it's just not the difference. So this thing here will not factor. Now we have found a third one. Now I'm going to start getting worried if I find another one, okay? And if I find 2 more, I'm going to get real worried. So the next one, 2 terms. Is there a GCF? Nope. Is it difference of squares? Nope. Even though 64 is a perfect square, it's also a perfect cube, and this is a third power, so that means we are on SOPs now. This is going to be set up SOPs, S-O-P-P-S. So the setup looks like this. P, bring down my plus, and then 4. 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. That's where I get that from. And then square the first term. So this is going to be P squared, which is P squared. Opposite sign. I got a plus, so it's going to be a what? A minus. And then product, we're going to take the P times the 4 and get 4P. Always a plus right here for that P. And then square the 4 out here. Gives me 16. It's almost the same thing we did in class with that 80 or 82 or whatever number it was. Okay, except it may have been X's instead of P's. So this is P plus 4. And then P squared minus 4P plus 16. How many terms is in the next one? Again, 3 terms. Is there a GCF? There's no GCF, and then there's a 9 in the front, which means this is now bottoms up, right? We're going to take the 9 times the 25. I'm going to come out here in my thought cloud. I'm going to have k squared minus 30k plus 225, right? 9 quarters is $2.25. That's how I think of that. 8 quarters is $2, and 1 more is going to be $2.25, right? So either way, take a calculator, multiply it out. What do you have to do? So now I'm going to see, okay, look. This is a 1 in the front now right here, right? So I'm going to take a k and a k, and I want the factors of 225 that add, to give me 30. Well, look, remember I told you, if your number's a perfect square, try that first. It may not always work, but try it. And 225, if you've been looking at your list, is 15 squared. 15 times 15 is 225. And guess what 15 plus 15 is? You guessed it, 30, right? So then the signs are both, that means both, that sign, both negative. So they're both negative. But I'm not done. I'm still in my thought cloud. I've got to go back and divide by my 9 right here, right? And here. So divide by 9. 15 over 9 has 3's in common. That's a 5 and a 3. This is also a 5 and a 3. And I'm going to do what with my 3's? Bring them up, right? So that's going to be 3k minus 5 times 3k minus 5. But look, I never want to leave something that looks identical to something else, right? I want to come in here and say this is going to be 3k minus 5 squared. So then I'm going to put in here 3k minus 5 squared. And then we have another one with 4 terms here. 4 terms, no GCF on this, on any of them, so on the whole 4 terms. So this is going to be grouping again. Try grouping. The first 2 terms, what? X squared's in common, and we're left with 4x minus 3. Let's try the next 2 terms. We have a 4, and we typically bring this sign down here, right? So it's going to be minus 4, and then we're going to have 4x, because look, negative 4 times 4x gives me negative 16x, right? And we're also changing signs. Then we need a 3 to get 4 times 3 is 12. But look, if I have a negative here and a negative here, then this gives me a positive 12, right? So then that's minus 3. Did grouping work? Why, it certainly did, right? Because I have 4x minus 3 in both these. So then I'm going to come up here and say this is 4x minus 3. And then what's left over? Well, in the blue, I'm left with x squared. And in the orange, I'm left with what? Minus 4. So then I ask myself, hey, look, x squared inside a parenthesis, does this thing factor? Even power, subtract, perfect square, you bet. That's the difference of squares, which means we leave the 4x minus 3 out front. That won't factor. And then we factor this one into x and 2 and x and 2. One's plus and one's minus. This one goes into both those, right? The other one just comes down. So 4x minus 3. So that one had 2 factoring steps. Grouping first, which is a few steps. And then it's factored again with difference of squares on part of the grouping. So now we're going to turn the page over. And we're going to solve the following equations. Remember, we had 4 steps on this. The 4 steps were get the entire thing equal to 0. The second step was to factor. The third step was to set each factor equal to 0. And then the fourth step is to solve each one of those that you set equal to 0. So step 1 here, already set equal to 0, right? Over here, this is already factored. Step 2 is done, right? So then we have to go to step 3, where it's 8x minus 7 is 0, or x plus 2 is 0. That's step 3. Now that's done. And now we go to step 4. We solve, add 7. We get 8x equals 7. We divide by 8. So x equals 7/8. Over here we subtract 2. X equals negative 2. And that's step 4. Step 4 now is done. So we have 7/8 or negative 2. I already have the x equals. Don't write it in the box, right? It's already there. 7/8 and negative 2 are your 2 x values there. The telephone, it's equal to 0 already, so step 1 is already checked. Step 2, to factor it, that's going to be difference of squares, even power, subtraction, perfect square. So this is going to be c plus 6 and c minus 6 equals 0. That's step 2. Step 3, what is step 3? C plus 6 equals 0, or c minus 6 equals 0. And then what do I do for step 4? So step 3, I should have checked those off, right? This one is now done. Step 3 is now done. And then step 4 is to solve each one of them, right? So I'm going to subtract 6 here and get c is negative 6. Over here I'm going to add 6. c is equal to 6. So step 4 is now done. I have 6 and negative 6. Or I could write it as plus or minus 6, right? C is, I could write C is negative 6 comma 6. That's one answer. Or I could say C equals plus or minus 6. Either one of those works. Commas between them. No commas between them. Then go write this out here too. X equals 7/8 or negative 2. All right, so let's keep solving these. Keep solving these. M squared plus 2m equals 0. 2 terms. Is there a GCF? Look at that. There's an m. Please don't make this harder than it is. That's really just taking m out. Now it's factored. Step 2 is done. Step 1 was already done up here, right? Now step 3 is to set each factor. That one's done. Set each factor. M equals 0 or m plus 2 equals 0. That step's done now, right? Check it off. And then the last step, solve it. That's already solved. We don't need to do anything with m equals 0. Then we subtract 2. M is equal to negative 2, so 0 or negative 2. Step 4 is now done. I guess I could put that over there where the other ones are. Step 4 is now done. So we get 0 or negative 2 here for m. The star here, x squared plus 5x minus 24 is 0. Well, 3 terms, no GCF, and there's a 1 in the front. So that means I want the factors of, and by the way, step 1 is done, right? It's set equal to 0. That's why I'm trying to factor it. Factors of 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, or 4 and 6. They do what? Subtract to give me 5. That's right, 8 and 3. So we're going to come here, x, oops, no sign yet. I don't know that yet. X and x equal to 0. And we're going to have 8 and 3, or 3 and 8, doesn't matter. Bigger number gets the plus, right? So bigger number gets the plus. So we're going to have plus 8 and minus 3. They're different signs, right? So if you get a plus 8, you got to have a minus 3. And then what do I do? That is going to be step 2. Step 2 is now complete. So step 3 is going to be to write each one of those equal to 0. So step 3, complete. Step 4 is to do what? Solve each one of them. So that's negative 8, and over here it's going to be what? Positive 3. So then x equals negative 8 or positive 3. And step 4 is now done. So negative 8 or positive 3. And I'm going to fix this here because I don't like it. Fix that. Negative 8. So again, we're doing the same thing. Making sure it's equal to 0. Factoring. Then we're setting each factor equal to 0. Then we're solving. Right? So here, we want to first ask ourselves, is it equal to 0? And the answer to that is a resounding no. So my p squared is positive, so I want to take this and move it over because I want to keep my squared term positive. That's what I want to do. So I'm going to subtract 9p. I'm just going to write it over here. It doesn't really go with anything, so it's going to be equal to 0. And then remember, we want to put this in descending order. P squared minus 9p minus 36. I don't care what order it's in up here, right here. I want you to put it in descending order when you write it down equal to 0. Now, that's step 1. Step 1 is now done. What is step 2? To factor it. Step 2 is to factor it. So P and P, and again, this is a 1 in the front, so no bottoms up. There's no GCF. So I want the factors of 36. 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 6 and 6. I want the ones that subtract to give me 9. Well, 12 and 3, right? So 12 minus 3 is 9. The signs are different. Bigger number gets a negative. So 12 is negative, 3 is positive. Step 2, factoring, now done. Step 3. Step 3 is to take each factor, p minus 12 equal to 0, or p plus 3 equal to 0, right? That's step 3. Check. And then the final step, step 4. Step 4 down here is to solve each one of these. So we're going to add 12 to both sides. And over here we're going to subtract 3. So then p equals 12 or negative 3. So then 12 negative 3 is what p is there. And then finally we want to solve this one. Is it equal to 0? No, and it's factored on both sides, but it doesn't help me any to be factored. So I actually have to do a lot of work for step 1. Step 1 is to get it equal to 0. So I got to distribute, get 3x squared plus 3x equals, nothing else to do on the left-hand side, distribute this side, 10 minus 10x. Now, again, my x squared is positive over here, so I want to take this stuff and move it over, okay? That's what I want to do. because of that positive x squared. So I'm going to add 10x. Add 10x and then subtract 10 from over here too. All right, so I just kind of stuck that down here. There's no like term there. So that all cancels over here. It gives me 0 on the right. And on this side, I have 3x squared. And then these two terms go together, right? That's going to give me plus 13x and then minus 10 in descending order, right? I want to go from biggest power to lowest power. Makes it easier when I get ready to factor it. So step 1 is now equal to 0. It's done. The problem is equal to 0, I mean. So step 1 is now complete and finished. Finito. So step 2 is to factor this. 3 terms, no GCF. Look at this 3 out front. That means this is bottoms up. I'm going to take this 3, multiply it by the 10. And that gives me x squared plus 13x minus 30. And I want 1 and 30. I don't have room inside there. I didn't get myself room. So 2 and 15, 3 and 10, 5 and 6. And some of y'all might be going, ooh, 3 and 10, 3 and 10. But guess what? We want to subtract to get 13. And 3 plus 10 is 13. So we don't want 3 and 10. We want 2 and 15. X and 2, x and 15. And what about my signs? Different, bigger number gets a plus. Which one's bigger? That's right, 15 gets the plus, 2 gets the minus. And then I come through here and do what? Divide by 3. Does 2 over 3 simplify here? Nope, so the 3 comes up. This now becomes 3x minus 2 for the first one. The second one, that becomes a 5, and this becomes a 1, so there's nothing to bring up, so it's just x plus 5. And now look, we had this equal 0 here, so bring it down here, right? That's equals 0. And guess what? Step 2 is now finally done. So that one, step 1 was pretty long. Step 2 was pretty long. Now what is step 3? Let's bring this up here. Step 3 is to take 3x minus 2 equal to 0 or x plus 5 equal to 0, right? So all step 3 is just to say, hey, let's take both or all those things. In this case, it's just both and set them equal to 0. And then finally, step 4 is to solve each one of these. 3x equals 2, divide by 3, and x is equal to 2/3. Over here, subtract 5. Oops. So then x equals 2/3 or negative 5. So 2/3 negative 5. 2/3 or negative 5. So that does it for your review for test 3 on factoring and solve by factoring. Remember, 15 or 16 factor, 5 or 6 solve. Don't solve for ones that don't say solve or have an equals to start with. Okay, only factor those, and then these, be sure you solve all the way down. Give me the variable equals or whatnot. And by the way, this was step 4 right here in blue, and it's done now. All right, so good luck with the test.